Hello and welcome to the program this week. I'm Layo Adegoki. Let's begin with stories and happenings that made headlines over the weekend. On Saturday, thousands of demonstrators gathered in front of the presidential palace in Khartoum, calling for the military to seize power as Sudan grapples with the biggest political crisis in its two-year-old transition. The military and civilian groups have been sharing power in the East African country in an uneasy alliance since the toppling of long-standing President Omar al-Bashir in 2019. But following a failed coup attempt in September, attributed to forces loyal to Bashir, military leaders have been demanding reforms to the so-called Forces of Freedom and Change (FFC) coalition and to the civilian cabinet. However, civilian leaders have accused them of aiming for a power grab. Still on Saturday, lawmakers in the Democratic Republic of Congo selected a new head of the Electoral Commission as police used tear gas to break up scuffles between supporters of the president and an opposition leader. The National Assembly chose Denis Kadima to lead the Independent National Electoral Commission, (CENI), a body that political analysts and diplomats have criticized for its role in the disputed vote in 2018 that saw the election of Felix Tshisekedi as president. Tshisekedi is expected to seek a second term when Congolese voters return to the polls in 2023, with the CENI likely to play a key role again. On Saturday, around 10,000 opposition supporters marched through the streets of Kinshasa in protest over several issues, including the accusation that the process to select the leadership of the Independent National Electoral Body was being influenced by politicians. On Sunday marked the 60th anniversary of a bloody crackdown on Algerian protesters by French police. French President Emmanuel Macron attended a ceremony outside Paris to remember the victims in the first recognition of the massacre by a French president. The ceremony commemorating the anniversary of the massacre took place at the bridge of Benzons west of Paris, where some Algerians had started their march and where many bodies were recovered from the Seine back in 1961. The commemoration comes amid diplomatic tensions between Paris and Algiers. Earlier this month, Algeria recalled its ambassador to Paris, citing comments attributed to President Macron, who was quoted by local media saying Algeria's rulers had rewritten the history of its colonization based on the hatred of France. To our main stories for today, Sudan's cabinet is holding an extraordinary meeting amid an escalating political row between factions of the ruling Forces of Freedom and Change (FFC). Pro-military Sudanese protesters rallied for a second day on Sunday, aggravating what civilian Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok called the worst and most dangerous crisis of the country's precarious transition. The protesters gathered outside the presidential palace in central Khartoum, demanding the dissolution of Sudan's post-dictatorship interim government, saying it has failed them politically and economically. The protests come as Sudanese politics reel from divisions among the factions steering the rocky transition from 3 decades of the rule by Omar al-Bashir. Pro-government supporters are saying they are planning a counter-protest on Thursday. Well, Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is linking the food aid coming from abroad with diplomatic pressure on the country. In the statement reported by the state-owned Ethiopia television, ETV, he says Ethiopia needs to stop receiving the assistance to avoid that pressure, adding that if wheat does not enter the country, 70% of the country's problems will be solved. The Prime Minister was speaking during a visit to a wheat farm in Oromia region. Ethiopia, which is among major aid recipients countries, is facing increasing pressure from Western governments over the conflicts in its northern Tigray region, where millions are at risk of starvation. In the meantime, Tigrayan People's Liberation Front is reporting that several civilians have been injured after airstrikes hit the capital of northern Ethiopia's Tigray region. Ethiopian families are fleeing fighting in Amhara to the town of Desi, describing the dire conditions they're facing, which includes hunger. Diplomats are worried that renewed fighting will further destabilize Ethiopia, a nation of 109 million people, and also deepen hunger in Tigray and the surrounding regions.
The pictures on her phone are all that Ethiopian mother, Habtam Makele, has left of her 3-year-old daughter, Saba. The girl died of malnutrition last month before the family was able to flee south, deeper into Ethiopia's Amhara region.
The doctors told me she has been severely affected by malnutrition and they cannot help. Then they gave me some syrup and tablets. She passed away exactly a week later.
Habtam is among an influx of thousands of Amhara families fleeing to the town of Desir from fighting further north. Officials warn the already overcrowded makeshift camps where displaced people sleep in rows in school classrooms will fill further after renewed clashes. Conflict erupted between the ruling party of the rebellious northern region of Tigray, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF, and the Ethiopian central government last November. The TPLF pushed into the neighboring region of Amhara, whose forces had fought alongside the military against the Tigrayans, as well as into the region of Afar. According to the UN Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, the Tigrayan advance forced around 250,000 people to flee their homes in Amhara in September. Habtam said there was little food in the areas under Tigrayan control and that Tigrayan forces took scarce medicines. But the forces have denied this, saying they had not looted pharmacies but supplied local populations. The United Nations has said that the Ethiopian government is only letting a trickle of food trucks and no medicines or fuel into Tigray, despite estimates that hundreds of thousands of people are in famine conditions, a charge the government denies.
Let's discuss more on the situation in Ethiopia. Joining us now is African Affairs Analyst Achike Chude. Thank you for speaking to us on Network Africa.
Thank you, Leo.
Well, let's begin with your thoughts on, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's comments that the food aid from abroad is the major problem in the Ethiopian Tigray crisis.
Well, I think it's a very bizarre claim by the Prime Minister. I don't know what he means by that. When it is very clear that there are hundreds of thousands of Ethiopians that are on the verge of starvation as a result of the ongoing conflict, and that the Ethiopian government is not in any way able to channel food, needed food, requirements to that region. It's not just even the region. Of course, it's a region that is beset with conflict. But all over, Ethiopia, famine has been a very major issue. So you can imagine what is going on in a crisis-ridden, Tigray region of Ethiopia. I mean, the issue of emergency food aid is usually what accompanies a conflict situation like we have in Tigray. It has happened all over the world. The international community wants to intervene. They want to help. They want to ensure that the most vulnerable of the society, are not, do not starve to death. And so you would expect that the Ethiopian government would be very pleased that they are trying to channel these resources, much, needed resources in a region that is in dire need of them. But unfortunately, of course, maybe that is why the international community has accused his government of not allowing food aid to get medicines to get into that region. Obviously, he feels, from what we are seeing, that perhaps starvation might be a major component of the war against the rebels in the Tigray. That's why I said his statement is bizarre and defies reasons.
Well, he's been under increasing international pressure, just like you have highlighted there, concerning that the Tigray crisis. And this Tigray crisis is now even spilling into neighboring regions. What role do you think, the African Union should play in this situation?
I do not think the ECOWAS has covered itself in glory. I think they have this dilemma of how to deal with their peer, with their peer. It's a problem for them. They have not been able to adequately respond with the kind of annoyance, justifiable anger that they should muster. Because it would appear that the Ethiopian government is doing everything to block every attempt by the international community to try to bring some level of normalcy to what is going on in Ethiopia. And I think the most, apart from the entreaties that they have, made to the Ethiopian government on the need to allow humanitarian aid to get to the troubled region, I think their most serious action to date has been to the declaration or the announcement that they are going to set up a committee to investigate the possibility of human rights abuses in the Tigray region. And of course, the Ethiopian government did not take kindly to that. Of course, we know that Ethiopia is housing the headquarters of the African Union. So that's why I say it is a dilemma they have. They are expected to do much more. Perhaps encourage the international community to impose some kind of sanction on the people who are involved in this particular crisis, especially the president himself. But again, the issue is if he does not have assets, economic assets outside of Ethiopia, how are you going to go about sanctions? Can sanctions have a way of punishing the weak and the vulnerable in the society? So it's a dilemma. But one would expect that ECOWAS would speak much more forcefully to the Abiy and then promise him some kinds of punitive action in concert with the rest of the international community, such as the United Nations and the European Union.
Well, just finally, it's been 11 months of fighting, in Tigray with casualties rising. What impact do you think this could have on the overall perception of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, who came into power promising reforms and is also a Nobel Peace Prize winner?
Well, the honeymoon has long been over for Abiy. He came in with so much energy and then with zeal. And did so much. He tried to bring peace in Ethiopia. He released a lot of political prisoners in Ethiopia and reached out to members of the opposition. And he was welcomed. Some of the peace moves that he made, of course, again, of notable interest is what he tried to do. He stopped the war, against Eritrea. So all of these things were things, and then of course beyond that, his very positive role in places like Sudan. And then other parts of the Horn of Africa where they were having crisis. He tried to mediate and to ensure peace. Was brought to those countries, and on the basis of that, the international community responded positively to him, and that was what was responsible for the Nobel Peace Prize. Of course, all that has gone with the wind. People are beginning to see a different person, and not the person that initiated all of these peace moves and tried to ensure peace within the continent of Africa. And so that is the irony. It is almost the same kind of thing that we have with Aung San Suu Kyi of Burma or Myanmar now, who was also a recipient of a Nobel Peace Prize, but under her watch, all kinds of abuses have gone against the Rohingya, Muslims. So his image has been shot to pieces, and I don't know how he's going to try to recover that, but it is not a very, a good image that he has made for himself as a result of the conflict that has gone on. He has not shown that statesmanship that he expected from other African leaders, that he demanded of other African leaders.
All right, then, African Affairs Analyst Chike Chude, thank you for speaking to us on the program.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
United Nations World Food Programme is warning that it may soon be forced to cut food rations to more than 500,000 women and men and children in northeast Nigeria. Well, the organization is also calling urgently for funding of at least $55 billion in the coming weeks. Speaking at a press briefing at the United Nations in Geneva, Thomson Phiri, World Food Programme spokesperson, said that the food rations could be cut in a matter of weeks. Without additional resources, the Food Assistance Agency is saying it will run out of funds for emergency food distribution and nutrition support by the end of October 2021.
The World Food Programme will be forced to cut food rations in a matter of weeks. We are not talking of months, we are not talking of a 6-month period, we are talking literally of weeks unless we receive urgent funding. We are facing very severe levels of hunger that we have witnessed since, this is probably the highest that we are witnessing since the crisis exploded in 2016. Approximately 4.4 million people are facing acute food insecurity in the conflict-affected states of Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe. What makes this situation of concern is that we were already providing prioritized assistance. There have already been austere measures that we had implemented, and the situation now will mean we have no other choice but to implement deeper cuts. We urgently require 197 million United States dollars over the next 6 months to be able to sustain our operations in Nigeria. The situation has largely been driven by insecurity. Of course, we have a confluence of climate crisis as well in the north, but it's largely insecurity, with reports of non-state armed groups targeting civilians, community leaders in the northeast. The peak clean season was between June and August, and just after that, people are really on the brink. And by that, I mean, you're talking of about, we are assisting 1.7 million people, and of these, 800,000 people face emergency levels. Emergency levels is just one step away from phase 5. That's catastrophe. That's a step away from famine.
Well, the U.S. government is not only fighting terrorism within its territory, but also extending its helping hand to Nigeria in a move to address global terrorism. The U.S. Deputy National Security Advisor, Mr. John Feiner, after a meeting in Abuja with Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Jeffrey Oyama, discussed the modalities for the collaboration. Although there are plans for other areas of collaboration, tackling terrorism is a common priority to both countries.
This is a hugely important and consequential and close relationship for the United States, and I really want to start just by underscoring that. It is at the center of so many of our shared strategic priorities, from getting our arms around the global COVID-19 pandemic, to climate change, to the democracy agenda that President Biden has championed, to the range of shared security threats that we face, including terrorism. President Biden has been exceedingly clear that our foreign policy really will begin and end with our close collaboration with our partners around the world, and for that reason, as much as any, it is very important that we stay closely aligned on all of these priorities, and why it was so important to travel here.
We had excellent and very fruitful discussions that really looked at all the various areas of cooperation and engagement between Nigeria and the United States of America. We talked about the COVID situation, and in this context, the U.S. has been extremely generous and has just very recently, last week, provided again vaccines to Nigeria, Pfizer and other vaccines, over 3.5 million that were delivered, and I pointed out on behalf of the government of Nigeria how grateful we are to the U.S. government for this generosity. We discussed issues of democracy in Nigeria, and the importance of the U.S. and Nigeria as big democracies to safeguard and democracy and fight for democracy.
Provisional results from Cape Verde indicate that the main opposition candidate, Jose Maria Neves, has won the first round of the presidential election. 7 candidates are bidding to replace President Jorge Carlo Fonseca, who is not allowed to serve more than 2 consecutive terms. But the results from most polling stations declared Mr. Neves has about 51% compared with about 43% for the governing party's choice, Carlos Veiga. If confirmed, that would be enough for the opposition candidate to win without the need for a runoff vote. Local media reports that Mr. Veiga has already acknowledged defeat on television and congratulated Mr. Neves. The turnout for the election was 48.3%. A boat carrying 80 African migrants has been rescued after it malfunctioned off the coast of the Libyan city of Garabuli. Officials say the migrants include women and children who are from Mali, Gambia, Sudan, Nigeria, and other nationalities. Libya is home to nearly 600,000 migrants, according to UN figures. Most are from sub-Saharan Africa, some attracted by the prospect of work in the oil-rich country despite years of conflict and chaos, while others just see it as a jumping-off point for travel to Europe. Over the past week, authorities in Tripoli have arrested thousands of migrants and held them in detention centers in a crackdown that has resulted in several deaths. The husband of the Kenyan athlete Agnes Tirop has appeared in court as a suspect in her murder. The magistrate said he would allow police to hold Ibrahim Rotich for 20 days, during which time he will be assessed to see if he is mentally fit to stand trial. Mr. Rotich was arrested last week in the coastal city of Mombasa. Police said he was trying to flee the country. His wife, Agnes Tirop, was found stabbed to death in her home in western Kenya last week. Last month, she broke the world record for a women-only 10-kilometer road race, shaving 28 seconds off the previous fastest time. Egypt says it will bar unvaccinated public service workers from entering government buildings from mid-next month. On Sunday, a cabinet notice said workers would have to be vaccinated or take a weekly COVID test to be allowed into government buildings from the 15th of November. The cabinet also allows the opening up of bathrooms in mosques from Wednesday. The bathrooms were closed in March last year as part of measures to contain the spread of coronavirus. The government has also allocated £1 billion Egyptian pounds to address the pandemic. Egypt has administered more than 30 million vaccine doses out of a population of over 100 million people, as according to data from its health ministry. In South Africa's Franschhoek Mountains, invasive pine trees are choking off water supplies to millions of Cape Town residents already facing climate change-induced shortages. A crew is there to help remove 54,000 hectares of alien trees by 2025 in the process of reclaiming an estimated 55 billion litres of water that's lost each year.
High in South Africa's Franschhoek Mountains, a helicopter drops off workers, specially trained in Apsil, to remove invasive pine trees that are choking water supplies from Cape Town's major dam catchment areas to millions of city residents. The crews are part of ambitious plans to remove 54,000 hectares of alien trees by 2025, as climate change and rising temperatures presage drier spells across South Africa in future. Using hand saws to cut saplings while dangling off craggy cliffs, or armed with petrol chainsaws for older trees on firmer ground, the team sets up a remote camp 4,000 feet above sea level, their base for 2 weeks.
By cutting down these alien trees, that they are
They are eating more water than the indigenous planters.
Crews from the Greater Cape Town Water Fund are targeting infestation of woody alien trees, mainly pine, but also Australian acacia and eucalyptus, that carpet swathes of mountainside in dark green as far as the eye can see.
Pine is the main invasive species that we find in the catchments, and as a result of this infestation, Cape Town loses 2 months' water supply every year. That is 55 billion litres a year. And if we don't do something about this problem, the water losses will double within 20 years. So it is essential to act now and act decisively.
First introduced in Cape Town from Europe during the 17th century, pine trees today form the backbone of South Africa's commercial forestry industry. With no natural enemies, their small seeds are easily dispersed by the wind, allowing them to spread rapidly from suburban plots to national parks and inaccessible ravines, according to scientists.
And that's it on the program today. Thank you for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke.